This episode of the show is brought to you from the Salesman.org HubSpot studio. Welcome to the Social Selling Show with myself, Will Barron, founder over at Salesman.org, and the king of social selling, Daniel Disney. How's it going, mate?
It's going really well, Will. Excited to be back today. And we got quite a good, interesting topic today. Another one of those unique ones that you don't see people talking about it on LinkedIn. It's not something you see a lot of people writing about, but it's a really important part of the process that I think a lot of people forget or ignore.
It's the least sexy thing we're ever going to talk about on the show that might make you the most money. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about how you can nurture your buyers via social selling, via social media, after they've made a purchase. And we'll start with this. I think we're going to be relatively aligned on this question, Daniel, but why do we need to nurture our buyers after the first sale has taken place?
Well, hopefully, Will, the people watching and listening to this are long-term invested in their customers and not just looking for that quick sale, which we know, unfortunately, a lot of the bad stereotypes of salespeople are the ones that are trying to get anyone and everyone to buy from them, and they're only focused on that individual sale. Hopefully, the people watching and listening to this are looking beyond that, which is why it's important, because one customer in itself can create so many more opportunities, whether it's buying again in a year's time, whether it's buying additional items, whether it's connecting you with other departments to sell additional items, and then you've got referrals. So an individual customer has a ton of opportunity as long as you look past them as just an individual customer.
So you've done all the hard work, you've done all the stressful work, you've done all the research, you've done that initial building of trust. Why would you just let all that go to S and just not leverage it on the back end to do more deals? And we're going to see this in most marketplaces as everyone moves to a subscription model. I can't think of an industry that isn't moving towards a subscription model versus a upfront capital payment. As all that shifts, everyone's commissions are going to shift towards get so much in month one. It's going to sound almost like a multi-level marketing scheme at some point. You get so much in month one, so much in month 6, and then so much in 18 months. And so it's going to make total sense eventually for everyone to adopt this idea of selling once and then either upselling via price increases, which happen naturally and organically, upselling and cross-selling different products within the space. And then something that I don't think we've done a show on, but we should definitely cover, getting referrals as well. So a buyer buys from you, you give them value, hopefully the amount of value that you promised, you've exchanged that for the cash, the capital that they've shared with you. You nurture them a little bit longer, and then if you've done a good job, they're going to be happy to promote you internally, as you said, Daniel, within other departments, within other kind of offices, perhaps, within if it's a large enough organization, but then also within the little peer groups as well. So we'll definitely do a show on referrals in the not too distant future. So that's the why we should do this. And hopefully people are sold on this idea. And you should be sold on it because tough shit. You're going to have to do this as everyone moves to this subscription model. But how do we do it? Is it the same process? Is nurturing from contact to close the same as nurturing from close to next close? Or do we need a different strategy?
They're similar, Will, but they are different. You're going through a different process when you're taking someone from prospecting through to close, and then it is a slightly different process, but they involve a lot of the same activity. So we've covered this in a lot of the episodes, the whole process of giving value through your content, building your personal brand. And what's amazing about LinkedIn and social selling is you do that beyond the sale. And we go away from what I'm sure you and I both remember from our sales experiences, maybe once every 3, 6, 12 months, phoning up your customers. Hey, Will, how's it going? How's the product? How's everything? Great. Do you want to buy anything else? No? All right, I'll give you another call in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it may be. And you flip that round to almost potentially daily interaction. When you're sharing content of value, when you're interacting in their content, you're creating a conversation on a much more regular basis. So when you do decide to have more sort of deeper conversations, it's not out of the blue. It's not after an extended period of time. There's been things happening in between that, and that helps elevate it and sometimes create even more opportunities.
So we've never touched on this before, and I've never pondered on it too much because all our social efforts over at Salesman.org, we only have one product. We don't have a follow-on product. That's a flaw in our business model, right? But most companies, especially if they're hiring sales teams and hiring larger teams, will have multiple products that go over the cycle of a customer journey. how do we prioritize our content on the daily that we're posting? Should it be 100% new customers? Should it be new customers, success stories, and then upselling opportunities like 33, 33, 33? How do we schedule our content out when we know that via LinkedIn, let's say we're a year or two into the social selling process. So we've got lots of customers who have purchased from us already within our kind of ecosystem. Let's make that assumption. What should the split be between the content, or do we need to even go in depth into it?
The only answer to that question was going to be it depends on what your priorities are, what your targets are. So if you're an SDR and your priority is purely new customers, new prospects, then your focus should be on content that's going to generate that. But if you're an AE and you're looking after accounts whilst also hopefully prospecting for new ones, then you need to determine that split. But you're absolutely right. That is an awareness piece people should be thinking about. Depending on what your targets are, make sure your content reflects that. So if it is maybe a 50-50 or a 30-30-30 split, then make sure that is reflected in your content. You have content going out designed to generate new business. You have content going out designed to nurture and give value to your existing customers. And then you have content going out to maybe expand or upsell or cross-sell into new products as well. So yeah, it purely is dependent on what your targets are.
And we don't need to go so in depth. I can't remember the chap's name. It's going to come to me. I interviewed him on the Salesman podcast a little while back, and he done his company done tons of research on the upselling process. He's going to, if he ever watches this, he'll slap me over the head when he sees me on the back of it, because we went super into depth for this upselling process. And I'll give the analogy, and I'll come back to the company and his name in a second. If not, I'll leave it in the show notes. But what he described was, we've got to be careful when upselling. Because when you get someone through the sales process, they've gone through probably quite a bit of pain. The pain levels are up here because of the problem they have. They've probably gone through maybe even more pain to get the problem solved, on the promise that the pain levels are going to drop dramatically after the sales process. So now we've got to be careful, because if we say, well, hey, you've been through this process, if you go through a little bit more pain, we can give you this. Then they go, well, you're just bringing me pain over and over and over. You're not really solving things. This is when we get into these like internet scam get rich quick schemes where you go, well, I'll pay 50 quid for this, and I get onto a webinar, and then I've got to pay 200 quid for this, and then I've got to pay $5,000 to get to a live event, and eventually I'm going to get or Scientology and a whole bunch of different religions all kind of follow on the same premise here of you get past one barrier and there's multiple to go through. And he talks about this idea of the buyer, once they've made a purchase, they've got this big weight of, we don't want to change, sat on top of them again. And so we've got to be careful, because as soon as we lift that weight of, I don't want to change, our competitors can go in and they go, well, okay, the game's up again. We can move around. We can reinvestigate the original deal and see if the competitors of the products have changed, the market has moved, and we can perhaps get a better deal than what we did originally. So we talked about this idea, this big weight being sat on top of the buyer, and you've got to be careful of when you lift it. So with all that said, Daniel, what kind of content should we be creating where we're not telling the buyer that change is easy? What we've got to do essentially, I guess, is tell the buyer that change with us, now you've invested with us so far, is easy, but change to go to someone else, a competitor, that's going to be even more painful, and you don't even want to investigate that. You want to just keep going down our own sales process, our own sales funnel. I know just throwing a lot at you there, but is there any content that we can create to upsell at scale, I guess, via content marketing and via social selling?
There is, and the key to it comes to storytelling, which is a skill salespeople tend to have or should be investing in. And there's lots of storytelling sales courses out there separate to LinkedIn and social selling, because you would do it over the phone or via email. With LinkedIn, it's bringing storytelling and mixing it with creativity to find ways to share the things you do, to share some of those principles around the dangers or risks to go into a competitor without doing it directly. So it's finding ways to create engaging content or share stories that help your customers see what you do and understand how simple it can be, how easy it can be, the benefits, the ROIs, etc., without directly telling them. And in terms of how you do that, there's just so many different ways. It could be through connecting it to a TV show or a film that's come out and finding I saw someone do this with the Floyd Mayweather Logan Paul fight. Here are lessons relevant to the industry connected to that fight. Totally separate subject, But what you do is you connect to people that probably watched that fight or had an interest in it. And then whilst they're reading it, they're learning about these things that you do in a kind of subliminal but not aggressive subliminal way.
Sure. There's a great book on that very topic of taking the news and turning it into content called News Hacking. It's super old. It's written in the 90s, I think. But that's a great resource on that front. And I'll ask you in a second of any resources or structures to build stories. But one thing that I find salespeople who are slightly missing the mark on social tend to do is that they make themselves the hero as opposed to the customer the hero in their stories, which makes sense because we're all egocentric. We're all focusing on ourselves. It seems like a good idea to say, hey, I went into this account, I did this, and I got their revenue up by 200% or whatever it was. I cut costs, I saved them this pain, this litigation, this stress. Whereas what the buyer wants to see is people within their marketplace, their peers. You went in and were the guide, but the actual individuals within the account and the account itself was the hero. So other than that, which is super high level, probably didn't help people that much as a story structure. Have you read any books? Have you read any kind of guides on building stories that you think would be useful for the audience?
Similar to you, Will, and I am terrible with names, so I can't remember. I think it's Mick Adam wrote a book about storytelling specifically for sales. It's a great book. He puts out a lot of great content. But what I liked about it is it was storytelling focused on sales, which is so applicable to LinkedIn. All it encourages you to do is to tap in and understand how to tell good stories. Doesn't matter which format you do that in. It's not designed for LinkedIn directly, but it's so transferable. So that's probably one of my favorites. The other one I'll mention, it's not a book about storytelling, but it's a book called The Extremely Successful Salesman's Club by Chris Murray. And simply because it is a beautiful story about sales. So reading it helps you understand how you can wrap something that perhaps wouldn't be in a story in a story.
For sure. I'll link to some other books in the show notes as well that kind of go along these lines. You probably need to read one or two of them to get, or even better, is a better solution for this to follow yourself, Daniel, and then just copy your stories with a different context and different heroes. Is that, should we model success as opposed to go deep into the trenches and try and reinvent it or create it from other people's structures?
As much as I'd fully happy for people to follow what I do, what I would also recommend on top of that is follow key people in your industry. There will be people in your space selling your products and services or similar ones, and have a look at what they're doing, because they're going to be doing it a lot more relevant to your customers.
Sure. Okay. Is there anything, I feel this is a bit of a shorter episode, Daniel. Is there anything we need to add on this? Because I feel it's a short episode. We've been to the point, but it's still, I don't think we've dropped the hammer just how important this is for the audience.
I think one of the key points we haven't really touched upon, but is really important to focus on, is value. And that word is thrown around a lot in sales and social selling. But value is important. The value you give your prospects and customers on a long-term basis determines the success of that long-term relationship. So we can dig a little bit now into what value means, but that has to be a core focus. Everything you do. So from the moment they sign on the dotted line, make sure you're connected on LinkedIn with them in the first place. Then make sure you're sharing content that's going to be valuable to them. We talked about the various split. Either way, make sure whatever content you share, they're going to get some value from. Maybe that's an insight into you and your journey, so they get to feel like they're following your process, whether it's a story, insight, knowledge, whether you're getting experts in that are going to benefit them, all these things. That's giving value. When you do that on a regular basis, then match that with engaging in their content. If they're sharing content, like and comment on every other post. Don't be too stalkery and do every single post, but like and comment on it. It's going to make them feel good. And it's not only maintaining, but building and strengthening that relationship. So giving value through your content and engagement is a real big part of nurturing those long-term relationships.
Okay, so let's dive into the topic of value, because this is a story, a topic in its own right. For someone who's just bought, the data suggests that the biggest thing, the most value you can give to them at that moment is to reduce any buyer remorse, especially within a large B2B account where perhaps one person's made the final decision on the back of multiple other people. Nobody wants to look like a complete idiot if it all falls apart. So you really need to emphasize next steps. You're going to do this directly as opposed to social, but we'll come on to social in a second. You want to emphasize next steps, make sure that everyone is on board with the process, and you want to report back as soon as you can data on success, even if it's just, hey, the software is now set up, your users are in the account, whatever it is. You want to report back success as quick as possible to reduce this window and this moment of potential buyer's remorse. And this goes back to this analogy of you've got this big rock and you want to keep it on top of your customer. And I guess the rock at this point is a big rock of value that you've delivered. And as soon as you start to lift it up because you want to upsell them, you want to do a price increase, you want to do whatever, there's the opportunity for them to go to a competitor. So you want to increase the rock that's on top of them to keep them held in place and make them satisfied with what they've bought. So with that said, how can we do that with social media and our content on social? It seems like one opportunity is to post customer success stories and almost have like once or twice a month a 7-day success story of someone goes from buy to success. And that obviously has to be relevant and it has to be a real testimonial case study. That's probably the hardest bit, to uncover those testimonials and get that written down and documented. But it seems like that is a starting point. Is there any other way, or a better question perhaps is, what else do buyers want in that window of purchase to 30 days? What value do they want that we can provide them at scale over social media?
I guess there's two types of value, direct and indirect. So the indirect is, as you say, Will, it's the content, it's the sharing, customer success. And again, don't forget there's other additional bits of value you can deliver indirectly. So it could be maybe once a week you interview an expert and they're going to be able to watch it, read it, consume it, and gain insights they can go and use. That's value. If you're working in sales, you get a sales author on, or you're selling to sales leaders, you get a sales author on who's sharing some of their top tips. As a customer, I'm getting additional value to the product or service you've sold me. So that's great. That's indirect value. And again, that whole engagement interaction on LinkedIn piece is indirect value that you give. If we look at the direct value, don't forget LinkedIn is a communication platform as well. So if you want to give them updates or check up, you don't just have a phone. You don't just have an email. Why not ping them a video message on LinkedIn? Why not ping them an audio message? Or a written message? There are all these additional ways you can use it from a direct communication perspective to deliver value. It could be a video message. Hey, Will, just wanted to let you know we've got all your customers logged into the system now. Here are going to be the next steps. Quick 30-second, 60-second video that they might consume, which they're going to get value from because it's interactive, but it's still that kind of direct communication.
I think we can get this. We've gone from a short episode to a 7-hour one now. But I think we can get even more practical with this of, if you have an account sign up and you've got good relationships with them, you could probably ask them once a week, hey, what's the biggest problem? Or once every 3 days, what's the biggest problem you have right now? What's the biggest problem you have right now? Perhaps the decision maker signs the contracts, there was this issue with the contracts, there was this problem, there was this, and document it. Then 7 days later, our team are, they're not so motivated to get on the product. We know that when we get them on there, they're going to do great. Document that. 14 days later, the users our team are using the product, the end users, we're starting to see some benefits and now we're starting to get some motivation, but we found this, and this. And we're not talking about product issues that would go to a product manager to get engineers to fix. What we're looking for is where we can create micro bits of content that might not be appropriate for you to ring up every 3 days and pester someone, but you could easily ping them a message on LinkedIn and say, hey, at this point, 7 days after people sign up, people typically have one or two of these issues. Here's a quick video that solves these issues for you. And it might be something you don't want to clutter someone's inbox with, and you don't want it to be like an automated marketing message of, hey, we've all been through them. We have to click through the guide and go through all this nonsense when really we just want to get into the product itself. We can personalize it. We can do it from the competitive advantages that salespeople have, in which case it is personalized and customized to an individual. And especially if we've just sold to them, we built that relationship. We perhaps got some more context that a marketing team doesn't have. I feel like that framework of just even a message once every 3 weeks until we see that first bit of results, in which case we want to formally document that and email it so that the buyer can then share that internally so they look great in front of their colleagues, that we make them look like the hero. But informally, if we just ask a few of our customers as they're going through this journey, we can perhaps collect data that allows us that gives us a reason to reach out, as opposed to, hey, I was just thinking of you and just time-sucking calls and emails and texts like that. I feel like if we do this once or twice, we've probably got a really good framework to reach out over social over the next kind of 30, 60, 90 days.
I really do. I mean, it's genius, Will. But again, it's understanding some people are either more likely to respond or prefer to get communication via things like a video or an audio message. As you say, some people don't have time to answer your calls. Some people's inboxes are absolutely jammed and they're going to miss those emails that you send them. But actually, that little voice note that comes through or that video message that comes through on LinkedIn might capture their attention. And it's that whole principle of actually communicating with them in the way that they prefer to be communicated with. And it's, I guess, the whole kind of moral of this episode is it's deeper parts of LinkedIn and social selling that a lot of sales teams, salespeople don't think about. They kind of think, right, I can only use LinkedIn for prospecting, so that's all I'm going to use it for. And there are so many more ways you can use it outside of different parts of the sales process. And it's just realizing it's more than a simple tool.
Well, I'm seeing this. I don't want to plug it, but I see this with our training product at salesman.org. We've got a community in there. There's tons of people chatting, going back and forth every day. Regularly, I'll get people message me on LinkedIn because they know that I'm crap at replying on email, right? It's common knowledge. If you email me, I'll probably get back to you in a month. But they reply to me, drop me a message on LinkedIn, and as soon as I recognize their name as a customer of mine, a part of the community, I'll respond immediately on LinkedIn. And there's perhaps questions that they don't want to ask in the community, but they want to ask me personally. So and maybe they just like LinkedIn as opposed to our platform because they're logged in it all day and they don't want to log into another piece of software, right? So you're right. We've got to flex our communication platforms for where our customers want to communicate. And that in itself is, even if it's the same communication that we're doing, that's an extra layer of value that we can offer these people as well.
100% Will, 100%. And that's it. Going back to the whole value bit, it's sort of mirroring what your customers want, whether it's in the content, whether it's in the way you communicate. And LinkedIn creates all these opportunities. So as soon as you've got that customer, LinkedIn doesn't stop. There are so many ways you can use it to just communicate beyond the phone and email. You can give value through the content you share by engaging in their content. And all these things are going to help nurture, grow, and make these relationships stronger, longer lasting. And LinkedIn's continually growing. So more and more people are using it for more and more hours per day. So it's becoming a big part of not just prospecting, but beyond the sale as well.
For sure. Okay, well, we'll wrap things up with that. That is Daniel Disney, king of social selling. My name is Will Barron. I'm the founder over at salesman.org. And with that, we'll speak to you next week on the Social Selling Show.
See you next time.